We live, Vic?
Believe so.
Oh boy. Okay.
All
Well,
right. Give it a minute or two.
Let some people trickle on in. Happy Wednesday from the Peak Design office in San Francisco. It is sure nice to be here. I'm joined by a few faces you might know by now, and at least one you probably don't. Unmasking this gentleman right here. So I'll start with first Adam, our head of marketing, you know.
Howdy.
He's going to serve as our moderator today, our Andy Richter, if you will. Tom James, lead engineer on top of Tripod. We've got Rob Jankura coming from Colorado, lead engineer on bottom of Tripod. Center columns uniquely go between both. This gentleman right here, David Berryreiser, excuse me. Please say hello.
Hi, out here from South Bay, coming up, and happy to be here.
Tell us what you do for your day job.
So my day job is in the laboratory. I'm working a physics lab, and we make ultra-cold atomic solitons, which means we are getting as close to absolute zero with lithium that we possibly can, and in fact, as close as physics allows us to.
Amazing. Just for grins, or?
Mostly for grins.
Yeah. Nice. Right on. Great. Cool. I've always wanted to slow down atoms too. Must be a hoot. Those of you who do or do not know David, he is the author of The Center Column, which is a website that we discovered at some point during our research and development of our tripod, and found it to be an invaluable resource because it was the first time really that anyone has taken a crack at putting data to tripods and their performance. Why don't you just give a little background on how the hell that came to be?
So it all really started when I was down in Patagonia, and I was trying to shoot on the hillside, and it was real windy, and I had this tripod, and my camera was just flopping around on the tripod. And so I started looking and wanted to replace it, get an upgrade, but couldn't find any data on what makes a good tripod, or why one would pay $1,000 for a tripod versus $100, which got me to experimenting in my garage. My first attempt involved a mouse trap on the tripod to try to create some vibrations.
Amazing.
And through a series of stumbling and errors, I really found the right formalism to discuss tripods, which was like just a very basic stiffness model, stiffness and damping. You know, how much force does it take to make the tripod move and make your image not sharp?
Yeah, right on. I bet you didn't stick with mouse traps, huh?
No, I did not stick with mouse traps.
Yeah.
Rat traps.
I've got
Yeah. Market.
I got a little rodent problem in my house. I'm not going to get into right now, but those have been finicky.
You're veering away from the outline.
Okay. Well, why don't you bring us back on track, Adam?
Cool. Well, we are here today to kind of go deep on our decision that we announced a couple updates ago to switch the center column on the carbon fiber tripod from carbon fiber to aluminum. And basically what we want to do is just kind of go deep on the reasoning behind why we made that switch, and then address some of the key comments and concerns that a handful of vocal backers have been asking on the comments board. And then obviously we want to make sure we take time to answer y'all's questions, so you can enter those in the comments section on the YouTube video, and I'll be reading those and prompting these guys with it.
Cool.
So maybe we can just delve right in.
Let's do it.
The 4 reasons that we made the switch.
Can you give us a mute when you're not talking? Thanks,
So basically, the decision to use a aluminum center column on the carbon fiber tripod can be broken down into 4 reasons: vertical slip, rotational stiffness, and counterweight hook load. Oh man, I messed it up.
So close.
Can we rewind this at all? No. Shoot, we're live. Pete, maybe you can just kind of delve into those ones, talking about what vertical slip, rotational stiffness, and counterweight hook load actually refers
Right
to.
on. Some folks probably watched the Peter McKinnon video that came out on day 1 of the tripod's release, and it was highly embarrassing when using it. Well, this one's aluminum here. When using it and put weight on it, he actually made it slip. And that has to do with the performance of our ability to get the center column to lock up using this mechanical action right here, this twist knob. An extraordinary amount of thought has gone into how to create a lockup mechanism there that sufficiently holds the center column in place, given quite extreme geometric constraints, all of which are derived from trying to achieve the general theme of this tripod, which is one that collapses in on itself far more effectively than any tripod in the past. And no mechanism more so than the center column lock has received that attention. Now there are two fundamentally different things, or excuse me, there's one fundamentally different thing about an aluminum center column versus a carbon center column. Excuse me, there are two. One of them is its coefficient of friction. And we have tried a lot of different options on this center column to try to get it to be stickier, which is of course a battle because it can't be too sticky because then it doesn't slide right. Those include no finish whatsoever, wax finish, sandblasted finish, painted finish of multiple varieties. We simply never got performance of that thing through all the testing and engineering we did to be nearly as good as it is on the aluminum. And so we don't want heavy rigs that are out there, or rigs where it may be a combination of it being heavy and you manipulating the tripod and you press on it and it comes down. That is a very distasteful failure, a soft failure, but a failure of a tripod. And so vertical slip is one of the major issues that we had with the carbon center column, mostly having to do with its ability to provide friction.
And yeah, let me just jump in there too. So efficiency should be brought up as well, which is essentially how hard you have to turn the knob. And so for a given input torque, you turn it to a certain amount of torque, and then you put a weight on the top. And this is actually something that we're doing on 100% of the tripods we make. Our QC team is actually doing this. They take a fixture and they basically tighten it to a certain amount, and they put a weight on it. We basically don't ship anything that doesn't pass that weight. So we have a tight efficiency spec. And it's because we want people, when they're using it, we know it's a relatively small knob, again, to preserve this really tight thing. We want it to feel good and to feel efficient so that you don't have to crank it very hard, so that when you're using it and you're quickly moving the center column up and down, you give it a quick twist and you're already getting like 45 pounds of slip resistance, which is, outweighs most of the rigs you'd actually put on there.
Sure. So
even for the center column, if you or for the carbon version, if you really tighten it, you could still get pretty good slip resistance. However, the aluminum, the just efficiency was significantly better. So.
And I'll start by going into well, you knew that at a certain point. How come you didn't? How come you're just switching it now? I mean, we filmed and launched this product in May 2nd is when the Kickstarter launched. These prototypes came out March, April of that year, or excuse me, of this year. And so between April and today, which is November 5th, 6th, or 7th, it's got to be in that region, a lot has changed. There's so much engineering that has continued every single day marching forth toward this. So we assumed, even though we knew we had poor numbers on the slip results of a carbon center column, we thought that it was going to be an engineering challenge that we would be able to get over the hump of and provide a similar efficiency to aluminum. It simply didn't happen. Best efforts didn't happen. So I'm kind of isolating it to just one issue right now, but there are actually four. But that was the first one we were presented with. Well, do we go with less good slip performance compared to the aluminum, or do we switch to the aluminum? Let's think about that. Not sure that's enough to make a change right now. Second one that came up is torsional slip or rotational slip. And that is, I don't know, Vic probably can't see this, but on the micro level, on the mic, I think it's, I doubt it. But what happens is that at the beginning of rotation, imagine a pan shot. Whether you're doing a video or something like that, or a heavy kind of rig. Yes, I realize there's no panning ring, but it doesn't take pan shots off the table. At the beginnings and the ends of those, there's a little bit of settling that takes place. That right there, that rotational slip, it's another situation where it's kind of a soft failure, but it's something that we just don't have on the aluminum. It's absolutely rock solid. And we have done all that we can to try to correct that issue, to the point where we're using different bushings for the carbon, different edge profiles. Like, we have invested lots of time into solving that issue, and again, it hasn't been solved. A third issue, this little mechanism here, brilliant little thing that old Tommy put together, depends on a really complicated way of attaching a hook to a center column. We couldn't simply screw something in there, because in order for there to be a female thread in there, it would have prevented us from inserting this clever feature. So it needed to have the entire profile of the center column open. To do that, we came away with an idea where we are essentially machining into, we're taking a T-cutter and we're machining into the inside edges of the tube just a millimeter round of available step to get on. Probably would benefit from some diagrams here, but the point is we're doing an undercut that has a very, very small amount of overhang, and that's what allows this to work. The problem with carbon fiber is it is not a solid substance, and when you machine carbon fiber, depending on the layup inside, it can suffer from strength performance when you begin to machine it. And aluminum does not have that problem because it's one solid material. You're not going to get fibers that are kind of by chance cut that were important in that process. And so concerns about consistency of maximum weight on the carbon center column were another thing that tipped things in the favor of the aluminum center column. Kind of stumbled over that. Is this an opportunity for you to fix that, or did I do that well?
I thought you did a pretty good job, boss.
Okay.
Annual reviews coming up.
Yeah.
I really did think it was a fairly good explanation, and I also want to emphasize we had results for the carbon tubes in both at least specifically with this issue as well as the slip, where we were getting numbers that were right on the line of kind of good enough. And what we want is to make a very durable product that's going to last. And so there were some extra questions about if you have a certain number of cycles of insertion and removal, can you wear away some of these sharp carbon fiber edges? It's not a good idea in general to be machining carbon fiber you just have to you have to take care of that edge really well. So it was an existing kind of slight design issue. It wasn't a major driver for this decision, but it's definitely one of the many things where we're just like, look, we've tested this hook both in pulling and in torsion resistance, and we're getting numbers that are like twice as high as the carbon version. Is the carbon version good enough? Maybe, but this is definitely a more durable product. So
just to recap, compared head to head, the aluminum center column better resists vertical slip. It better resists rotational slip. It allows the center column hook to hold more weight. And then there was another part about improved rotational stiffness. Maybe you could talk about that.
Well, that's why we brought this fella in.
Yeah.
And I think that, let's have you take a crack at it.
Yeah, sure. So when you're looking at a tripod and it's just in its normal configuration and we're looking at the stiffness, what we see is that as the tripod rotates, the legs bend. And when it's rotating in the yaw direction, the legs are bending back and forth this way. When it's rotating in the pitch direction, camera's pointing up and down, we find the legs are bending this way. And so everything that occurs in stiffness is all about bending in the legs. So when we go to the center column, though, raise up a center column, we're getting, again, we've got bending stiffness in our pitch direction, cameras pointing up and down, but when we go to look at the yaw direction, where the camera is rotating left-right, we find that it's actually a torsion on the bar, and the bar itself is twisting. So with the center column, we actually have a very different design consideration. And this is where the difference in aluminum and carbon fiber comes in. And carbon fiber is a wonderful material in that it is very stiff in one direction. A single carbon fiber, which is just this very thin strand like a hair, will be extremely stiff when you're trying to compress it or expand it. So what you do is you put it along the leg, and it prevents the leg from bending because the carbon strand doesn't want to compress or expand. Now, if we go to a center column, we can do that same thing and orient the fibers vertically, and it will be able to resist bending. However, then like a hair, it has no lateral stiffness at all. So the carbon fiber center column will be able to rotate yaw and torsion much more freely than an aluminum tube. And so aluminum is a material that's what's known as isotropic. Its strength is the same in any direction you try to push, pull it, twist it, which is great for this application because now it's simultaneously strong in both bending and twisting. One of the comments that has been brought up is, okay, so why don't you just make a carbon fiber tube that's strong in both? Well, you can wrap carbon fibers at an angle around the tube, and that really helps with torsional stiffness. However, that requires another additional layer of carbon fiber in the tube. So what we'd have to do is create two sets of layers, effectively, like two carbon fiber tubes adjacent to each other, which by the time you're doing that, the end product you have is heavier than if you had just used aluminum to begin with. And it's actually even a little worse than having to put tubes together because putting material inside the tube is never going to be as strong as it is on the very outside.
Because it doesn't have a very high moment of inertia, it just does a poor job of creating all the forces it needs to create when it's so compact and in there. And I would further add that we are constrained on the thickness of our center column because of the mobile feature. And then there will be some people who say, well, I personally would prefer to have a carbon center column and no mobile thing. And I appreciate that that's an opinion that people can hold. The problem is that we can't custom tailor each of these individually, by any stretch. We have to take the engineering information in front of us and make the best product decisions that we can make. And that I do want to say that when it first came up that the engineering team wanted to switch to the carbon fiber tube, guess who was strongly against it? It was me.
Switch to the aluminum tube.
Excuse me, to switch to the aluminum tube. I really didn't want to. I didn't want to put in a late breaking change of any reasonable significance. There have been literally hundreds of changes that have occurred since we put that since the April model that we were filming and talking about. But this one is obviously customer facing, and I'm sensitive to that because I know that people have opinions, and I definitely understand what those opinions, where those opinions are generated from. But the fact of the matter is that on top of the 4 criteria that the engineers presented, there wasn't a better decision. There really wasn't. And so at the end of the day, I said, let's do it. Let's go forth because it's simply a better product. And what we're talking about here, I want to remind people, is 8 inches. 8 inches. 8 inches of carbon fiber versus aluminum. It's really not that much. And that's why the weight difference is 16 grams. And as far as the visual appearance, much of the time you're going to be shooting with the shorty center column up there anyways. It has an aluminum top to it. The carbon fiber tripod is full of aluminum components. There's even some plastic in it. I didn't want to make the change because I didn't want to have to be so delicate with our explanation, and I knew we were going to have to be. And when we made that explanation, I thought that we had done a good job of explaining it, and I was hopeful that people would get it, and in large part, they did. The vast majority of the people on the comment board have been supporting this, saying, we trust that this is your job to come up with designing the best product.
So let's
go
actually
ahead.
go back to some of those like key points of concern or skepticism that folks have had. One of them is like, hey, there's other tripods out there on the market that are all carbon, have a carbon center column. So like, why couldn't we do that?
Yeah, I mean, this is where David's testing and articles, I mean, this happened far before we actually began our development process. I actually remember reading the article about it. I noticed it, and it was basically counterintuitive. And I thought the basic logic behind it makes sense, but I was a little doubtful. But I still read the article, and I respected the logic behind it. And then we basically consistently ran into the same issues, this sort of counterintuitive result, and then we were going back and like chatting more with David, and it turns out he's basically seen this actually as a theme with carbon fiber base tripods with carbon fiber center columns, that they actually have a performance problem specifically with the twisting. So
Yeah, every carbon fiber tripod I've tested with a carbon fiber center column has poor torsional performance on the center column. Without exception, even from the top brands. There's a whole handful of carbon fiber tripods with aluminum center columns, and they have all performed much better. So,
that is incredible, and I would like to be able to claim like, look at us, we were brilliant, and we observed this thing, and we elected to make that hard choice. But the fact of the matter was, it was the combination of things that encroached upon us as we went through this design that led to this process. And if anything, like, that was the icing on the cake. It was like, holy shit, it's actually better.
yeah.
That's great news.
And I've been trying to beat this drum for a while now that I think every carbon fiber tripod should have an aluminum center column. Obviously, we don't see that, but then again, I don't think that many people read my blog. So.
You're probably right.
You're a celebrity guest for no reason. All right, some more questions.
Yeah.
Isn't aluminum heavier than carbon fiber?
It is, and again, when we've got about 8 inches of it in the relatively similar thickness, it's 16 grams. That's 10 paper clips, and the fact that, like, when David describes it as a negligible difference, it is negligible in that when you pick up the two products side by side, a carbon with an aluminum center column versus a carbon with a carbon column, you cannot tell a difference. You cannot perceive the difference. However, when you pick up these two tripods right here, it's night and day. Like, we just got back from a trade show in New York City where we had both of them there, and like the most obvious thing to do is to fold up the two tripods and give each one of them, or give both of them to somebody, and they feel the two and they're like, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, all of us in the office have had that exact same exclamation. Like, it is a considerable weight difference. I don't have the actual figures in front of me, and like the numbers are important, and we can reference those. But the most interesting thing is just picking up these two products side by side and being blown away by how light they are. And the difference is, like, you're looking at 8 inches worth of the skinniest tube and smallest tube that we have versus 15 sections that are all considerably longer that are contributing to the differential in weight. So people who are asking, well, if aluminum is better for the center column, how come you don't, like, why am I buying the carbon? It's just like there's probably 40 times more material in the rest of the leg structure than there is in this little tiny piece of center column.
Yeah, and not only that, but the other main difference is just that the loading on the legs is just significantly different than the loading on the center column. The center column has to resist both twisting and bending back and forth this way, whereas the legs are, it's basically okay for them to be slightly torsionally weak, which means that we can spend all of our carbon fiber layup on the fibers, as David suggested, the long lengthwise fibers, which basically makes them great for our application, especially our tripod, where they've been, where we've taken a circular leg and turned it into a much different cross section to make it compact tighter. So
Trapezoidal abomination.
Peter, while you're all good and fired up, I might as
Yeah.
well just ask, aren't you just doing this as a cost-cutting measure?
Brian. Oh, if it gives you any pleasure, Brian, it did ruin my weekend. No, we're just not. It's $3.65. We have made so many costing decisions that make that thing irrelevant. We're going to be air shipping all of these tripods for Kickstarter backers from China. That's about a $35 increase in cost, 10x over the savings that we get from this carbon fiber versus this aluminum. We're opting to do that. Granted, because we wouldn't get them to you by the time we hope to get them to you if we didn't. We put in a metal injection molded hex wrench with 2 sizes and a brilliant little design and a clip that went on there, which wasn't part of our original plan whatsoever. We already had a different hex wrench. Like, we made that and we're putting that in there, and we didn't charge more for that, even though as a replacement part, it probably warrants a cost of at least $10. There have been so many engineering changes that have resulted in cost differentials between April, when, again, we filmed this thing, and now. It's just extraordinary. That BOM, the bill of materials, goes up and down and up and down and up and down with all of those. And to say that we don't have a mind for cost, that would be foolish. Of course we do. Like, we need to make a product that we can sell to our retail network around the world, which takes a really pretty large margin out of this. And if we make a product that blows it on the margin, then we don't have a product that's successful. But $3.65 in savings on this, that wasn't going to move the needle. It really, really wasn't.
Follow-up question. When did Kurt Cobain come back to life and start selling tripods?
All right, I don't like to focus on my appearance that much, but I've been meaning to get a haircut for so long. I was literally just Googling appointments at a public barber salon. I don't want to talk about it.
Thank you for the question, Stefan Silvey. Just to let you know, that hairstyle is called the Rachel.
I need a haircut so bad.
Let's see here. There have been a number of kind of questions around, like, do you have, like, the numbers behind this? Like, how much more stiff and stable? Like, what are the kind of empirical evidence behind this switch that's going to back up the performance claims we're making?
Yeah.
Should we wait for the dump truck to go by? Or
They're literally paving the street.
Sort of a back and forth thing.
Yeah.
On the numbers, the caveat is that we can't do continuous testing. There's actually it's extremely costly, and we at Peak Design we hammer products with testing, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, and if the test isn't performed right, or we make a false conclusion because we're trying to take a shortcut, then that ends up making the development cycle even longer. So we take pride in really doing a whole bunch of testing. Specifically on the numbers, it's seeming to be about 25% increase in yaw stiffness. That's with an extended aluminum center column. So it's basically significantly more stiff in twist with the aluminum center column. And then in terms of the slip numbers, that's based on a given input torque. But if you tighten it down and you put a heavy rig on, it's going from about 45 pounds of slip resistance to about 75 pounds of vertical slip resistance. Those are just a couple numbers off the top of my head, but again, these are based on like very specific tests with just like specific revisions of different parts. So ultimately what it comes down to is we have to make a decision based on the available parts we have that we're getting from our supplier, and basically try to take the best collection of those things and ship it to you to give you the best product. We don't have infinite time to mess with different layups of carbon fiber weave, etc., even though we really did want to. We wanted to ship a carbon center column, but yeah, I just wanted to note that we do a whole bunch of testing. We have to trust our test results, and then we have to select from what we have available, not this infinite design cycle and theory. So.
I'll just add in there that for the specs junkies in the crowd, we did an earlier update back when the campaign was live, going real deep into the performance numbers that David had produced for us for our carbon and aluminum tripods. We're going to have an updated set of all that stuff, and we will post that as an update, potentially as even like a field note on our blog,
Right.
With production tripods. So you'll get all the numbers and specs that you could want.
Yeah, and I think we have actually good news on total height and in packed height. We were able to shrink the packed height by about a half centimeter, while getting 2 centimeters, 1 centimeter, while getting 1 centimeter taller than we were expecting with the previous product. So, shit, that's worth 16 grams, isn't it? Like, that's awesome.
Absolutely. Let's see here. Some more questions from the crowd. Hey, somebody called you a class act.
Oh,
That's nice.
Kurt Cobain was a class act too, from what I understand.
What about damping? We talked a lot about damping earlier in that original tripod performance update. We haven't talked about it lately. How does that kind of factor into the new center column arrangement?
Sure, yeah. In theory, carbon fiber has a little bit better damping than aluminum, although the majority of the damping in the tripod doesn't take place in the center column. It takes place in everything else. So when we went and measured the damping of the carbon versus the aluminum center column in the same package, the results were within measurement error, in that they were so small that I couldn't see a measurable difference without taking 10 hours of data taking to reduce my standard error.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it.
And just really quickly, so damping means if you put a camera on there and you introduce any sort of shake, and in our testing, even the mirror moving can introduce a little wobble, especially if it's fully extended, that can actually mess up a long exposure shot, right? So
any tripod.
Yeah.
Any tripod.
Yes.
So damping means how quickly does the system stop shaking after you bump it.
Yep.
So the best tripod is one in which it's very stiff, as in if there's a steady wind pushing it, that it resists that and doesn't bend very far. But then it's also important that because every time you're touching the camera, you're moving it slightly. So damping is just that ability to immediately attenuate the shake.
Yep.
Are there any other brands who make carbon fiber tripods with aluminum heads?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
aluminum center columns, right?
I brought one.
You brought one.
Yeah.
Who is it?
Really right stuff.
Really Right Stuff. That's a good brand. Actually, we should note that at the tripod, or at the show in New York City, Really Right Stuff was there. Both the owner of the company and his son, who are great, awesome father-son company. Really Right Stuff is just great people, and they manufacture phenomenal products. And we stopped by their booth and had like a really wonderful conversation. It was the first time Tom had met either of them. And they showed us a prototype, which was very much along the lines of I think, the theory of what we've put forth, right, which is a tripod that collapses in on itself. And I realize I'm doing some advertising for Really Right Stuff here, but that was it was a prototype. It's at prototype stage. But things that were, there were a lot of things that were very similar, including a shorty center column, meaning a center column that has a detach capability in order to achieve that low mode. And it's also all aluminum. So the comparable Really Right Stuff product that I'm assuming will be out on the market one of these days is going to have a full aluminum center column. And it'll probably cost $1,500.
But example of a carbon fiber tripod with an aluminum center column. And I don't know the reasons why Really Right Stuff has gone this way, but I can say that it performs vastly better than the equivalent Gitzo tripod.
Wow.
So
Unbelievable.
And for those who are unfamiliar with Really Right Stuff, they are fairly easily the most expensive tripods on the market.
And they're made in America. They're made in Utah. That's even where they do their carbon layups. I think they gather parts from quite a few different sources, but really want to say, Really Right Stuff is an amazing tripod company. And they probably read your blog, David. That's probably why they did it.
They did this long before I read my,
okay. All right,
my
fair
blog.
Enough.
So
This is a shame that they don't have a more appropriate name for their brand.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that sick hoodie, and is the PD merch available?
Oh, man.
Somebody asked.
This sick hoodie comes courtesy, and by that I mean a box just showed up from my buddy Bubba, who lives in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and his Kickstarter just finished. I think it was their third. They had these sweet mitts that they make there in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he's been a friend for a long time. And he just up and sent us 30 of these things. It's a company called Giver, which is just all about giving her, you know.
Give her hell.
Give her hell. Give her whatever, you know. Just give her your best. Bubba's an amazing guy. They have a really cool brand. I think it would be amazing to support Giver in their pursuits, and their new mitts are hot. They are hot.
Hot mitts.
Hot mitts.
There's been a few questions still about what is the actual difference in cost between the aluminum and carbon fiber parts, and why aren't we giving kind of a kickback why aren't we giving a refund to backers for that decrease in cost?
Well, I think I tried to address that earlier by saying we didn't increase the price when we added in the hex wrench. And we didn't increase the price when we changed our finishing methods on these parts here. So many things have been changing. Vic, you can probably see this, maybe. This is a beautifully engineered product. It's our first time. It's our folding hex wrench with both a 2.5 millimeter and a 4 millimeter hex wrench. It is our first time using the process of metal injection molding. I don't think it'll be our last time because this shit is awesome. This is not something we had a tremendous appetite to do until our backers were like, we're gonna lose that hex wrench. And we, we listened really, really hard to that, and we went to great lengths to provide an incredible solution. There's tariffs now on tripods that are going to make our products be way more expensive and cut down our margins tremendously. There are so many little give and takes that occur between April and December, when these things will be shipping, that I don't think you'd like it very much if we actually increase the price to how much we're paying now. And so we're not going to decrease the price because of this particular engineering change that we made. Does that sound fair?
Sounds fair to me, man.
All right.
Sounds fair to me, boss.
Okay, boss.
No, I do think adding numbers in the peak design value of just transparency, adding the actual rough numbers here is helpful. The carbon center column, I think, costs roughly $4. The aluminum center column for us costs $1. That's just a component of the entire assembly, which is more expensive. And then comparing our BOM cost from August, which is just after the Kickstarter, to now, the BOM cost for the entire carbon fiber tripod for us, how much we actually pay our manufacturer, has gone down by 55 cents. So we pay our manufacturer 55 less cents than we were expecting to in August, which was even after we determined our pricing. And then for the aluminum, it costs us now $1 more to make than it used to in August. So that's just a reference. There's so many different parts that are going up and down, so many different details that are getting ironed out and are becoming more specific, and ultimately it's going to end up in a total BOM cost we're paying our manufacturer.
Right.
And it just simply was not a cost decision for us. And if we knew we could unlock extra performance by spending an extra $3, then we would have definitely done that. So we are talking about delivering a better product, and we're gonna save 50 cents.
That's right. That's it. Also, compared to other Kickstarters that Peak Design has run, this is operated a little bit more like, I think like most people use Kickstarter, right? Where you have a product that is not already manufactured. We didn't have this thing in warehouses ready to go. That's what we try to do on many of our Kickstarters, because it's great momentum that's retained when you can fulfill a Kickstarter as quickly as possible after it launches. And we definitely want to do that. It has been incredibly hard to manufacture this tripod. And hard for a lot of people on this team. And like I'm so like proud to tears sometimes with how hard this guy works and that guy works, and Wheeler in the other room and Adrian right there and our entire team in China. We have never built a tripod before. Fortunately, people on this team member have built world-class products, and they are applying that level of effort and professionality and precision to this. And so you are going to have a world-class tripod that performs every bit as well, actually better than any of the tripods that all the pro photographers that we gave these things to. Those were pre-production. Those were shit compared to what these are going to be. And like the team is working so hard on making that come to fruition. And that's why, Brian, I got so rattled, man. I got so rattled when there's an accusation of impropriety, of something fishy, of something that we're not doing right. For 10 years, I've run this company with full transparency in doing the right thing. We make mistakes, and we are immediately forthright about those. That's why people keep coming back to Peak Design. And you claim to have been around here for such a long time, following our story, which I appreciate. How come we don't get a break from you on that? I just don't get it. Like, we have shown no evidence of impropriety. And it really, maybe I'm thin-skinned, but like it simply hurts the feelings to have those accusations come in. So here we all are, making sure that we explain this in a sufficient way, taking a lot of valuable time. But I don't know. It's also just great to have a huge cadre of backers that are also on the comment board that understand where we're coming from and are supporting us. So I want to make sure that we express our gratitude to the Peak Design community, which is still just major in making this company and what it is.
Yeah, I'd like to say a thank you as well. Just we took this to the PDA, basically a trade show in New York, and we had early samples, and we had so many visits from people who were just really pumped. They had already backed the project, and they were coming there to like check out what they had actually bought in real life, and there's just the overwhelming amount of support for the specific product and Peak Design products in general. And yeah, I just want to say personal thank you to how basically positive my experience with so many of our awesome fans and customers and the people viewing now. So
right on.
I just want to echo that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we are 45 minutes into this, and I think we've kind of covered what we wanted to soup to nuts. I'll just throw in one more thing for there maybe a handful of folks that are still maybe not kind of convinced by all this. If you want to downgrade or cancel your pledge, we can take care of that. Email us at info@. There are many people that want to know when these things are going to ship. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll talk about
There's
that.
some guy in Russia, and it's like 1 a.m. there, and he's just like, guys, come on. Yeah, so.
Well, we said December. and it's going to be December. It's going to be every bit of December, but it's going to be December. We are actually and finally rolling tripods off the line right now. Did we hope that was going to be happening a little bit sooner? Yep, we definitely did. Do we hope that the rate would be faster than it is today? Absolutely. Right now we're doing 100 a day. Lockett is headed out to China, as
Peter
well as
Lockett.
Peter Lockett, that is, as well as Adrian, next week, and we're expecting the production to ramp next week to 500 units a day. We simply need the production to be quicker than that to make sure that every single one of these tripods ships in December. It is our current projection and our anticipation that that is absolutely going to happen. I think that the vast majority of people should receive their tripods in December as well. It's entirely possible that some won't receive them till January, but they should all ship in December. That being said, this is a new product. New product introduction is always insanely difficult. We expected that these things would be very much on boats around the world by now. They're not going to go on a boat. These are going to go on an airplane. And that means we've also got to pay for the extra carbon costs it takes to offset that, because that's what we do around here. And I definitely want to take a minute to talk about that. But the long story short about shipping in December in all likelihood could still be unanticipated problems, which push that off more, but man, we're trying.
To segue into the carbon thing, somebody actually asked if they could request their shipment to go on the slow boat to save the carbon costs.
Oh man, bless you. We're certainly, for all of our production, when we begin, sorry, yeah, I got that, Jim. When we begin selling these things to customers wholesale and direct, and Amazon and all the places that we sell things, those are all going on boats. We think that we owe it to Kickstarter backers to pay the cost, including the cost of the carbon, to make that go on an airplane. And frankly, to simply break out a couple of individuals and send them on a slow boat, I don't think that would be possible. Jen's over there in the corner going, and it's just because it's just hard. Like we do everything we can to streamline all of our processes right now, and that would be very hard. But I so respect that you would be willing to do that.
Is there something that somebody could do right now to maybe take responsibility for their carbon footprint?
Now there's a question, Adam. There is. We sent an email out and a note about a month ago announcing the launch of Climate Neutral. And when we sent an email out about a product that we're launching, I think the open rate on that email and then the click-through rate is something like 25%. The click-through rate on the Climate Neutral Kickstarter was 1%. And I don't know if that's a failure in our copywriting. Maybe we came off. Maybe we just weren't clear.
On the end of the bus here?
It might be you, Adam. I think that's reasonable. I don't think it's clear though. Like, we weren't talking about not using plastic straws or switching to metal straws, which are way worse for the environment actually. We weren't talking about we make some products now out of fish nets. Climate neutral is a solution that, if adopted, even by a good majority of the companies in the world, we would be having a different discussion about climate change right now. And like, how often do you get an email that is proposing an at-scale solution to a good chunk of the problem of climate change? And I'm not sure that we were direct enough about that. Like, that is what we are proposing. When you see climate neutral, when you see that logo on a product, it means that that company has paid to remove or avoid all of the carbon that it otherwise emits. And if every company did that, those 56 billion tons of carbon that the whole world contributes each year would be reduced substantially. We got to reduce our carbon footprints. It's going to happen with electric vehicles, electrification of industrial processes that require heat. That electricity needs to come from wind, solar, even nuclear fission God, this is probably another thing I shouldn't have said, but the fact is, like, carbon is the problem right now. And those reductions are not going to happen overnight. They are going to be a 2-generation issue, 2050 if we're lucky, to get our whole world electrified and that electricity coming from clean sources. What are we going to do with the carbon that we continue to emit out there? If anyone has a better idea than carbon offsets, let me know. 310-437-3404.
Oops.
That's the hotline. But I've done a lot of thinking about this over the past couple years, and observing our own carbon footprint is where that came from. Owning and running Peak Design is where this idea came from. When I found out that it is actually financially reasonable for companies to be offsetting their entire carbon footprint, when you go back to the extraction of aluminum ore from some place in Australia, it is affordable for companies to do that. 1/5 of 1% of our revenue is what it takes for Peak Design to offset its entire carbon footprint. And will carbon footprints cost $3 a ton forever? They better not. We want demand for carbon offsets to go in there so that the price of those things goes up. I will gladly pay 5 times the current average price. I'd pay $15 a ton to offset Peak Design's carbon, because that would mean it would cost 1% of our revenues to offset carbon. If the whole world did that, we'd get rid of our carbon problem. And that's what we're trying to say. So go to climateneutral.org. Go to that Kickstarter. Learn more. This is important. We're not sitting here wringing our hands going, climate change sucks. We wish there was something we can do about it. There is something we can do about it. We can pay for it. And companies should be the ones that are paying for their own footprints. Individuals have a responsibility too, and you can pay for yours over there. And feel good, legitimately, about helping carbon finance. But in the meantime, we're going to implore companies that this is the new low bar for sustainability. That's all I have to say about that.
Cool. Seems like you've really been honing that.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's about it. I think we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it. And backers, thank you for being there.
Thanks,
Very
Rob.
much. Thanks, Robbie.
Signing off.
See you next time.